Hey, this is Dave Pryor. We're here in the leading Agile booth at Agile 2019 doing interviews all week long with speakers and other thought leaders, people that are bringing Agile to the world. And we have a very important subject right now. And Lisa Cooney here, thank you for coming by.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You gave a talk yesterday called Brain Agility Overcoming Cognitive Bias. So, what is cognitive bias for the folks that aren't familiar with it and don't know that they have it?
Okay. Well, cognitive bias is an automatic functioning of our brain, kind of like hardwiring.
Okay.
So if we have a brain, we have cognitive bias. And learning about cognitive bias can help you understand more about your automatic responses that you may not have been aware of.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so a cognitive bias that's pretty common is the halo effect, which says that we tend to believe the person who speaks first and the person who speaks with confidence. So in the Agile world, we overcome that. We may not talk about the halo effect, but we know intuitively that we want to get all voices in the room. And so we have deliberate intentional practices like silent writing and affinity mapping that enable groups to surface ideas without focus on who came up with it and to brainstorm the best solution,
and so
for example.
The quieter voices get to rise as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to play out in lots of different ways. If I'm creating a new product, I have biases based on all the other baggage I bring with me to work. How do we become more aware of our own? Because everyone else is biased, but I'm not.
Right.
It's just them.
Well, I'd like to make a distinction between cognitive bias and unconscious bias. Unconscious bias has more of a social element to it. We tend to apply it when we're thinking about how we view groups of people. Okay. Cognitive bias, it has its roots in cognitive science and behavioral psychology, and the research on that is really applicable to any human being. It's not applicable to groups of people. And so there's a wonderful book on this topic called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And he's a psychologist, but he also got the Nobel Prize in economics because he disproved the theory of the rational agent and showed that a lot of economic theories were based on flawed assumptions about how humans behave. This book lays out a lot of different cognitive biases, what they are and how they affect us. And the more we learn about and understand them, we can devise strategies that might overcome them. And in Agile, we do that. Like another example where we do that a lot is there's something called the availability heuristic. And this says that the more recently we've had an example in our lives of something, when we're estimating whether or not it's likely to happen again in the future, we will pull on recent examples. And we overcome that in Agile by planning poker and using Monte Carlo estimates for future work, so that we gather all the variety of experiences and opinions in the room rather than going with what happened last week.
But even if you're doing something like planning poker, and I've got all the personalities around the table, we're all supposed to be equal in what we share. But sometimes there's folks that we might lean more towards trusting them than someone else. Or I mean, is that an example of bias? Like if this guy's very confident, this is why this is an 8. And the softer spoken person is like, well, I think it's really a 2.
Right. Well, this is why I recommend reading the book, because there's a lot of math behind this. And a lot of math in this book. You've taken a peek. And a lot of science. And because we're talking about how the brain operates, it's very complex, and our brains are doing multiple things at any one time. Right? So the more we understand about cognitive bias, I mean, you can Google it. There's so many of them. There's all kinds of fun websites that explain how they work. And we can come up with ways to identify when it's not so much like we need to know about every single cognitive bias as it happens, but as an Agile coach or a facilitator, Scrum Master, product manager, we need to be aware of when they might be influencing our decisions and leading us in an unhealthy direction, and then come up with strategies for turning the ship around a little bit with a group of people.
Or when we might be doing that to them, right?
Exactly. So like once you know about cognitive bias, you're still you're going to notice it, but you're not going to stop having it. So, for example, I love it when people are confident and they stand up and they speak first.
Right.
And then I'll say, oh, yeah, but I'm doing the halo effect. There's some quiet voices in here. I'm curious what's on their mind.
Okay.
Right? And so you notice when you yourself are being subject to, for example, the confidence or confirmation bias, which says that we tend to believe and give credit to ideas that align with our pre-existing beliefs, and we discount ideas or points of view. We just dismiss them when they're not in line with our current beliefs.
Because we know in our gut. I'm sure, I know.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we all tend to do that, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to keep on doing that. The more you learn about it, though, you can become aware that maybe confirmation bias is coming into your thought process or your relationships, and then you can sort of step away and have a deliberate practice that helps you cope and be more intentional.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm thinking this is going to play out if I have a startup, I've decided what the world needs, if I've got a team, I know what their problem is, all this stuff. But do you think it's that I should always be trying to find a way to disprove whatever I think?
No. I mean, well...
My instincts, my gut tell me that this is I have to figure out what assumptions have I made that I'm not even aware of.
That's okay. So, yes.
Okay.
Understanding and learning about cognitive bias will help you reveal to yourself the assumptions that you're holding closely.
Okay.
Because by definition, you can't be aware of what you're not aware of.
Yeah.
Right? But other people may be able to help you uncover what those assumptions are.
Okay.
And then you can say, oh, I had this idea about what direction we should go. I realize now I was making some assumptions that I need to check.
Okay.
They might be true, they might be false, but we need to get some more information or consult with some experts or get more opinions.
So if let's say they read Kahneman's book. I mean, I'm apparently 11 hours away from finishing it, but I'm like a good chunk into it, and I keep finding things that I thought were true, and I go through the thing, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's totally wrong.
Right.
So the next time I come to that kind of thinking in my head, I'm like, well, that's wrong. But what I wanted to ask was, do you recommend that people have some kind of accountability partner or something like that to point out to, like, say, hey, you know what, I might want to think about this again, because it seems like you're making some assumptions here that maybe you're not aware of.
Right. Well, what I found in talking about this passion of mine, which is sharing these ideas about cognitive bias with all the people I'm in my circles, friends, family, work, is that, they do get kind of sick of me talking about it, but at the same time, they help me see.
But they're biased.
Yeah, right. Well, they'll say to me, Mom, you're doing that bias thing. And I'm like, yeah, right. Just so knowing about it doesn't necessarily stop.
Doesn't fix it.
No, because it's think about how we evolved on the plains over millennia, right? Our brains evolved in an environment where things didn't change very much. And we're exposed to more information in a single day now than our ancestors were exposed to in their entire lifetimes. And our brains have not evolved to cope with that influx of data. We have a lot of automatic hardwiring in how we respond to things. It's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad.
It's technical debt in your brain.
Well,
legacy
think of
systems?
Evolution as technical debt, I guess. Yeah. So it's not a judgment. Yeah. It's not like you're wrong or you're right. It just is. And so
raises a question.
Right. Raises a question. So being open and expanding your awareness.
Okay.
And learning about this can help you learn to question your assumptions. Okay. Like if you probably read the chapter in Kahneman's book about giving medical news. Yeah. And saying, you have a 5% chance of survival versus saying you have a 95% chance you're going to die on the operating table, and how differently you. So I actually know someone who's struggling with cancer and has been reframing information doctors and others have been giving her about her illness in terms of Kahneman's
The opposite of it.
You know, think about it from a different perspective and see how you feel about it as you're making these decisions, because framing has such a big impact on how we think.
I was in an elevator teaching a class in a building, and they have a little screen, and one of the headlines on the screen said 16% of workplace romances result in marriage.
Oh.
And that's how I met my wife. But I read it, I was like, well, that's great. And then I'm like, wait, that's 70, 80, whatever, 84% end in not.
Right.
So that's not so great. Right. And they could have written it either way, but the way that they wrote it creates a spin.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and people ask me all the time, like, can you use these to your advantage?
You mean like to manipulate people?
Yes, and that's what marketers do.
Yeah.
I mean, marketers know this stuff cold. You know, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did all this research, and you know, this wonderful book summarizes probably 30 years of research on
Lots of different studies.
But magicians have known this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? So this isn't really new. People know that our attention is precious and can be easily distracted, and pickpockets, you know, take advantage of this.
So if you wanted to take this stuff to the dark side, you could learn about it to use it as a negative social engineering technique.
Right, but we're agilists and we believe
in the good, right? But we are trying to hack. The way I talk about a Scrum Master is their job is to hack people the way somebody else hacks code.
Right.
Not in a negative way, but to help them become a team and form that stuff. And you could use some of these things to create an environment that might head people down a path if they didn't know that that's what you were doing.
Right. Right. You can. And the way I use it in my own work is to create an environment where I believe self-organization can emerge that will lead towards psychological safety. You know, all the things that we value as agilists, right? So I'm leading them down a path, but I'm not leading them down a path of, here's this solution, here's the process we need to follow, you know, a dictatorial path.
Right.
It's more like I want to create an environment where they can be their best selves and bring their whole selves to work and their whole creativity and who they are as human beings every day. And if that means that I take advantage of my understanding and knowledge of cognitive bias to help create that supportive, nurturing environment, then, you know, that's a positive thing.
Okay. So if people want to learn more about this stuff, if they want to get in touch with you to ask you questions about it, I know you want them all to read Kahneman's book, but what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Reach out to me on Twitter.
Okay.
It's pretty easy. It's at Lisa Cooney.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer questions. I'm actually compiling a list. Cool. Upon request, I get this question a lot when I speak publicly on this about, you know, do you have a list of all the cognitive biases and all the ways that we can overcome them?
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, no, I don't have that list, but that's a really cool idea. I might start building that list. So
cool.
Fun.
Well, if you do, if you can send it to me, I'll make sure we add it to the show notes for the podcast.
Okay.
So
this
is great. Thank you for coming by.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great.